Canadian-born Andrew Beer is an internationally renowned violinist, both classical and contemporary, orchestral, solo. He teaches at the University of Auckland. He's a judge for various competitions, including the Michael Hill International Violin Competition. And he was awarded a U.S. Congressional Commendation in 2006 for humanitarian and outreach work. Andrew Beer is concertmaster for the Auckland Philharmonic Orchestra, and he'll play lead violin in a concert called Baroque Voices in Auckland on Thursday. Details on our website. He's in our Auckland studio now. Good morning.
Good morning, Kim. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. I always am inclined to ask violinists about their violin. I can't see your violin. You need to describe it for me.
Yeah, I have a 19th century French violin made by Jean-Baptiste Vuillaume, made in 1845. One of the greatest French violin makers, not quite as old or as expensive as the Italian makers, but really a fine violin nonetheless. I'm very lucky to have it.
And you describe your bow as well. I've never thought of a bow as being as important as the violin, but of course it must be, mustn't it?
It's super important, and also the chemistry between the two. You can have a great violin and a great bow, and they just don't work well together. So usually you buy the violin first, and then you spend a lot of time trying possibly hundreds of bows until you find that perfect match.
So the violin maker makes violins, and there's a whole nother industry making the bow. That's
right, yeah. Sometimes the bow makers would work in the shop of the luthiers, the violin makers. That's what happened with... So Vuillaume, my violin maker, he was one of the great... He had a big workshop in Paris in the 19th century. So actually a lot of the most famous bow makers of all time worked in his workshop.
And where did you buy it?
I bought it in Boston at Chris Runing and Sons, one of the major luthier violin sellers in the world.
And was it, an awful lot of money?
Unfortunately, yes. But it's well worth it. I mean, I spend more time playing violin than probably anything besides sleeping, so I think it's a good investment.
What's the definition of Baroque?
Baroque, it refers to the period of time when the music was written, of course, the era of J.S. Bach and Handel in the 18th century. I think the term comes from a Portuguese word which has to do with ornaments. The architecture of the day was very ornate, and that's reflected in the style of the Baroque music. You hear a lot of trills and turns, which are quite ornate.
And Handel and Bach are the preeminent composers we associate with it, and those are the featured composers in your concert coming up, isn't it?
That's correct. Yeah, they're the big two of the Baroque era.
Are you particularly fond of them?
I am, yeah, and of both of them, but of course Bach is sort of just in a league of his own. He's one of the great, not just composers, but human beings of all time. He was a complete genius.
A complete genius?
Whatever that means. He's just. I heard a study once that estimated if a musician of sort of average intelligence and capabilities spent their whole adult life from age 18 to 65 copying out Bach's music, just copying it out during working hours, they'd only get through 80%.
So much of it he wrote, you mean?
Yeah, he wrote so much, and it just came so easily to him. He did it so quickly. At the same time as having 20 children. I don't know how he did it.
He probably had a wife to help.
Yeah, he had a couple wives. Yeah. Not at the same time.
Handel's Zadok, is it Zadok or Zadok?
I think it's Zadok. Yeah.
Zadok the priest. Is that the one that's always played at the coronations?
That's right, yeah. Apparently ever since it was written in 1739, it's been played for the coronation of every king and queen.
Which, presumably, he wrote it for in the first place.
Yes.
He was commissioned, wasn't he?
That's right.
Right. What you're going to do for us this morning is to play a bit of comparative music. Bach's Orchestral Suite in D major, which is one of the pieces that features in the Baroque concert. You're going to play a bit of that from the original done by Bach, and then play a little bit of the later arrangement, which has been called The Air on the G-string, is that right?
That's right, yeah. So I'll actually play the entirety of the original one. It's not too long, just about 2.5 minutes. And then I'll play the arrangement by somebody named August Wilhelm from the Romantic era, from the late 19th century. And because of that, it's become known as Air on the G-string. The G-string is the lowest string on the violin, which sort of has a rich, romantic sound to it. But But actually, the original Bach melody had nothing to do with the G string. It's all on the upper strings of the violin, so it's a bit of a misnomer. People think of it as there on G string. It's not at all.
But
so
only because of the rewrite.
That's right.
So
yeah.
was August Wilhelm doing with Bach's Suite in D major what Emily Perkins has done to the Doll's House?
Perhaps. I just tuned into the end of that interview, but I think there's some similarities, yeah.
Is it just like a more modern adaptation of the original?
It's actually very similar. The melody's completely the same. He's just dropped it an octave, so it's a lower sound. But the melodies, to be honest, August Wilhelm didn't really do much to it. He just sort of used it as a vehicle for his own fame. Yeah.
Let's hear from the original then.
Sure. So that's the original in its entirety. I'm just going to jump immediately to the air on the G string, the arrangement by Wilhelm. You'll hear it's much lower in sound, and I'm going to use a lot of what's called vibrato when we shake our left hands to kind of emulate the sound of an opera singer. So that was the two of them sort of back to back, giving an idea of the different styles involved.
Which do you like best?
Oh, I definitely prefer the original.
Do you?
Yeah.
Because I'm such a pleb, you see, I quite like August Wilhelm's.
Oh, I love romantic music. I just think the Baroque music itself, I prefer it in its original. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's much harder to play, I imagine.
The original?
Yeah.
In certain ways, yeah. One of the challenges of Baroque music, as I said, there wasn't as much vibrato, the shaking of the left hand, so there's sort of a pure tone to it, and in other words, there's nowhere to hide in terms of the intonation, so you have to be very accurate when you play it.
But it sounded a lot more intricate.
What I did is, of course, the original is a full orchestra piece.
Yeah.
So I sort of improvised what the other parts basically
Oh, is that
sound
what you were
like.
doing?
Yeah. That's
Playing
not what
several
Bach wrote.
instruments all at the same time?
I was trying to.
How
Sorry, Bach.
clever. When you play that, what's your mind doing? What are you thinking?
Well, at first, always a bit nervous,
Yeah.
and then try to really get into possibly what the spirit of the composer was, or what I would imagine as a performer, or what the music is saying to me, and just trying to block everything else out and getting into that zone.
So you're not thinking about what your fingers are doing?
No, I think by the time you get to
Anymore.
a performance,
Yeah.
it's basically all muscle memory. So you're not actually technically analyzing a lot of what you're doing. It just sort of goes.
So when you practice, is that installing muscle memory?
Absolutely. Over and over again. Extremely repetitive. Yeah.
And do you have to keep doing it?
You have to keep doing it. If you
or
don't,
once you got the muscle memory,
yeah.
it's just, is it easy to bring up?
Once you've learned it really well, it's sort of always there. But if you learned it really well and performed it and then, say, left it for a couple of years and wanted to play it again, it wouldn't be very good. So it's never completely gone. It's always there in your mind, but you have to bring it back. You have to bring it back.
When I mentioned that you had received a U.S. congressional commendation for humanitarian and outreach work, I'm not familiar with what that involved. Can you tell me?
Sure. When I was going to school in Boston as a young man, I met a Jordanian pianist who was interested in this was a few years after the 9/11 attacks, and he wanted to show that actually, the Middle East has a lot of great cultural things to offer as well. So he put together an ensemble of musicians, jazz players, classical, and we all came together and we play as an ensemble, sort of fusing Middle Eastern pop tunes with other styles as well. And we'd also take small ensembles, like, say, a string quartet, and just go into prisons and schools throughout the United States. So in that way, we got to meet some famous people. I actually remember in Louisville, we were playing at a hospital, and then Muhammad Ali caught news that we'd been there, and he wanted to meet us. It was a great honor, a nice moment.
And would you pick that up again? Is it still going?
It's not going right now. I'd like to do something like that again. I'm quite busy in my current role as concertmaster of Auckland Philharmonia. But
it sounds like... What is a concertmaster?
A concertmaster is the lead violinist of the orchestra. So he sits at the front.
Always?
I always do. That's the role of
No,
the
but a concertmaster is always the first violinist.
That's right, yeah.
Ah.
That's just how it's turned out. Actually, originally, even before there were conductors, the concertmaster would kind of direct the orchestra with the scroll of the violin, go up and down to show the beats. So that's sort of the tradition where it's coming from, why the violin is always the concertmaster still today.
What's the difference between a concertmaster and a conductor then?
Well, as orchestral music sort of progressed and we got to the Romantic era, there were really big orchestras with a lot of tempo changes and really complicated music. So it wasn't really any longer possible for everyone in the orchestra to follow the violinist, so we need somebody standing up on a podium to show everything very clearly. That's the conductor's role. So the concertmaster now sort of acts more like a conduit between the conductor and the rest of the orchestra. Almost like a translator in a way.
Okay. It's a big job then.
It's quite a big job. I love it, though. I love all the challenges involved.
And what are the challenges involved?
Well, the playing is obviously the biggest thing. We have to lead by example. Actually, the first violinists who sit right behind me, for 99% of the time, we play exactly the same notes all the time. So I literally need to lead by example, do exactly what they should be doing to kind of inspire them. And then there's also non-musical aspects to the job. That was a bit new to me, sort of the political things, chairing meetings or doing radio interviews like this. So that was a bit of a new thing for me.
Is that what you have to do when you're a concertmaster?
It's become expected for concertmasters.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to play us another piece of music, and it's Bach's Chaconne. Is that how you say that?
Yeah, the famous Chaconne, that's right.
Yehudi Menuhin called this the greatest structure for solo violin that exists.
Yeah, it's an incredible piece. It's a simple form. The Chaconne is just, in this case, 8 bars that repeat over and over again in terms of the harmonies and the bass line. However, each time it's slightly different, so it's sort of like a vehicle for variation. But what Bach's done is turn it into a 14-minute piece with an incredible dramatic arc, and the listener just completely forgets the form of the piece and gets swept away in it. It's one of some violinists, when they're asked, well, if you could have one thing, if you're stranded on a desert island, what would it be? They always say, well, my instrument and the Bach chaconne.
And it's the fifth movement. The chaconne is the fifth movement.
It's the final movement of the D minor partita. From he wrote 6, 3 sonatas and 3 partitas, which have become sort of a staple of the violin repertoire.
What's the definition of a partita?
Oh, goodness. It's a collection of dances, which actually come from French times, Louis XIV. So we have like the allemande and the courante. So the influence is the French court dances.
So each of these 5 movements, they would do a different dance to?
Yes. I think this music itself would never have been danced to. It's actually unknown whether it was even performed in Bach's day or not. There's no record of it.
Oh, really?
But definitely the inspiration comes from the dance itself, yes.
How much of Bach's music was maybe never performed?
Well, most of it was performed once and then never again, because Bach was quite a practical composer. He spent much of his life in posts in major churches in Germany, so he would write music to be played on the Sunday and then never again. I think he would be quite amazed if he could come to today and see, oh my goodness, you're playing my music all the time. This is incredible. That wasn't the idea of music back then. It was sort
is
of
that
more
right?
functional. Yeah.
So he would say, oh, that old thing.
Yeah. Wow, you're still playing it. That's great.
Let's hear the chaconne, please.
Sure. I'm going to play the middle section of the chaconne. There's a theory that this piece represents the Holy Trinity, so this section would have to do with the Son. It's also fascinating. Bach loved mathematics, and this moment in the music comes exactly 61.8% of the way through the piece, which is the golden ratio. So the religion and mathematics would have been great inspirations for this piece.
Wait till Andrew puts his headphones back on. I'm talking to Andrew Beer, who is the concertmaster for the Auckland Philharmonic Orchestra, and the orchestra is putting on a show called Baroque Voices in Auckland on Thursday. It's such a sexy instrument, the violin, isn't it?
Oh, thanks for saying that. I never feel that when I play it, but it's nice to hear.
Does that mean you can play the other viola and the cello as well?
Well, the viola I can sort of play, but not very well. It's bigger, and there's different strings. The register of the strings is different, of course. And the cello, no, I can't play. It's completely different. The violin and viola we hold up on our shoulder. The cello is put in the floor and sort of played in a completely different manner. So that would be too difficult. I mean, I could make a sound, but it wouldn't sound very good.
The trouble is, when you're learning the violin, it doesn't sound that great, does it?
Oh my goodness, when I was a young kid, we had cats at home, and whenever I'd not even play because they knew what was coming, as soon as the violin would come out of the case, they would bolt as fast as they could. Yeah, it sounds really bad for a long time, and then you slowly get better and better.
And how long does it take to get better and better? I'm asking because I know you do the outreach to young people who may or may not want to take up the violin. How long do they have before they start sounding not terrible?
It takes a long time.
I know.
I think there's an estimate, it's 10,000 hours. I don't know where that specific number came from, but unless you're a prodigy, it takes years and years. I was not a prodigy, so it took me a long time to get there.
It's true. They say in order to get good at anything, you need to put 10,000 hours in.
Right.
So maybe nobody's a prodigy. Maybe some people just work harder than others. Do you think?
Could be, but certain individuals, like if I think of the great violinists like recently Sarah Chang or Midori, who are just absolute, or you mentioned Menuhin earlier. I mean, when he was 12, he just played unbelievably, not just technically, but musically. Just so mature and so almost perfect, as close to perfect as you can get.
And there's no way he could have put 10,000 hours in at that age.
That's right, yeah.
But you just had to work hard.
I did.
And the result is no different from being a prodigy, so that's a good thing, isn't it?
Oh, I'm not in the same league as the people I just mentioned. No. I mean,
we'll call you a self-made prodigy.
Oh, well, that's nice of you.
Very nice of you to come along and bringing your violin in. And I'm sure a lot of people will be looking forward to that concert. Thank you, Andrew Beer, who is concertmaster for the Auckland Philharmonic Orchestra, and the show on Thursday is called Baroque Voices.